Hello, my computer. Hello, everybody. You would expect that my internet has decided that today is the day it's going to play up. Fortunately, it's poison, isn't it? I have a backup. Are you hearing me? Can you put your hand up if you're hearing me? You can hear me. I seem to freeze. I do have a backup internet. Welcome, everybody. While we're waiting for everybody to join us, if you would like to pop where you're from in the chat, and also just a number, this is optional, a number out of 10, where 10 is you're energized and 0 is you're flat as a pancake. If we can do that, that would be great. Lovely to meet you, Tish. Did you get my email message asking, are you okay to do a welcome acknowledgement?
I just message it's best probably that you do it, as this is your space.
Okay.
To just enter. Yeah, it shouldn't be on a speaker.
All right. Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you. Zoom has changed their settings and it is just playing up. Let me just see if I can get this working before we get started. Nope. Okay. So as everyone comes in, thank you. I would like to acknowledge that I am a inhabitant of the most beautiful country, the Bundjalung country, which is in northern New South Wales, home of the Canberra language group. And I would also like to acknowledge that this land was never ceded, and I respect all of the many thousands and thousands of years of ancestors of this land before me, as well as the ancestors in my life and in the lives of all the participants here on this call. Thank you for being here, and may we all gather from the wisdom of our ancestors as we come together for this hour today for the She Changes Climate panel, which is the first part of 7 events that we have for Syntropic World. So just to give you a little tiny introduction, Syntropic World is committed to placing the sacredness of life as central to all activity, putting humanity back into every enterprise, designing enterprises that animate the more beautiful world that we know is possible. I would like to take this time to introduce you to our wonderful guests. There will be an opportunity for questions. So we're going to have, I'm going to do a series of questions first, and then I will invite people to, if they want to ask the panelists some direct questions. So first of all, we have Tishiko King. There, yeah, he is a proud, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce this respectfully, Kulagai woman. Is that, yes? From the island of Masig and Bardugal of Themu clan in the Torres Strait. Tish is an ocean and climate advocate across the climate movement and philanthropy sector. Tish is an ocean scientist, board director of Divers for Climate, and a member of the Climate Solutions Advisory Committee for the Australian Museum. Tish continues to be a part of grassroots organisations supporting the Our Islands, Our Home campaign, led by Torres Strait Island people, and plays a role in advocating for Torres Strait Island climate justice. Welcome, Tish. Dr. Janet Salisbury, Janet, if you want to put your hand up, thank you, is the founder of Women's Climate Congress She has a background in medical research, science writing, and communications, and was the founder of Biotext Proprietary Limited, which became an Australian leader in producing science content for our government and other organisations. In January 2020, with bushfires still raging, she called the women in her networks to 2 meetings in Canberra to discuss her ideas around amplifying women's voices for a collaborative national approach for climate action. Since then, Women's Climate Congress has become a dynamic national movement of women meeting with parliamentarians and community leaders to promote the Congress vision for collaborative, non-partisan action to secure the climate and create systems change for long-term human and planetary well-being. We have Mamta Borgoyary. Mamta, hand up. There you go. Mamta is a trained economist and currently serves as the executive director of She Changes Climate, an organisation committed to promoting gender parity and women's leadership in climate action. With over 27 years of experience in various fields, including environmental intersectionalism for climate justice, Mamta is leading the development of integrating voices of women in the Global South in climate change decision-making. Throughout her career, Mamta has been dedicated to improving the lives of underprivileged women and vulnerable children, ensuring their access to essential resources such as healthcare, education, and sustainable livelihood opportunities, particularly in climate-vulnerable areas. Mamta's achievements include integrating over 800 school dropout children back into the education system, rescuing more than 12,000 children from human trafficking, child sexual abuse and exploitation, and building the capacities of over 20,000 stakeholders for providing services efficiently and compassionately. She has also facilitated more than 5,000 women from vulnerable backgrounds to run their own small-scale businesses and provide professional training to over 300 women farmers. Yeah, wow. Wow. And thank you for joining us, wonderful women panelists. And thank you more especially for your work in the world. So I'd really like to open the question, and I'm going to direct this actually at you, Mamta, because this is the She Changes Climate panel. Can you tell us a little bit about She Changes Climate, its goal and purpose?
Thank you so much, Christine. First of all, I am very grateful, and I want to start today's session with due regards to my ancestors and now to all the late leaders of this diverse country that I belong to. I'm calling from India, and it is such a I'm so grateful to share this panel with Janet and Tish and you. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining this panel today. So She Changes Climate it's a global movement which is aimed at advocating for a 50-50 shared leadership in climate space. This is a collaborative movement, and it is aimed to bring the voices of the youth and women women leaders who are at the forefront fighting the climate impact every single day. We are a small group, remotely placed, and we work with several ambassadors, Tish being one of them, basically adding value. So this is a collaborative movement. It is a movement which is aimed to create a 50-50 space in the climate change movement.
Thank you very much, Mamta. And I would love to ask Tish, how did you get involved in the climate movement? What was the inspiration for you?
Thank you, and so wonderful to see everyone here. Thank you everyone for being here on a Monday afternoon. So I am calling in away from my homeland, so I would like to acknowledge too that I am calling in from your nation and just acknowledge the traditional custodians across the whole nation, honouring the footprints that have contributed to protecting culture, community and our land, sea and sky country. So I'm a proud Kukulug woman from Kukugal Nation, which is a Central Island group from an island called Masig, with blood ties to Badu Island. So for folks that are on this call, we have 150 islands in the Torres Straits, and only 18 of them are island nations. And so I come from a beautiful coral cay that sort of is like between what you would say maybe the Caribbean versus Bora Bora, and it's in the shape of a teardrop. And they say when you come to my island, you leave with tears in your heart. And so, you know, I was born from a womb that was part of a really long line of culture, knowledge, and strength. They have been the same wombs that have given birth and continue to birth warriors of saltwater blood, where the spirits of our ancestors are deeply weaved into our ocean, our sky, and our islands. Throughout my life, I have seen the role women have played in my life, from community and to on country, and from in the house. The honor to be raised in a cultural spanning these generations, a kinship that has been the role that women has played really equal to men in all living things, and a love that comes from a deep relationship and power and connection to Mother Earth. So I want to say I was born this way. I was born knowing that I had a fire in my belly that has been there because because through our history we have seen that's the way that land was grabbed was through extractivism, and that a part of that has reached from the inequalities and the impacts it has on people. And so for a long time, I've been doing this. I was always raised knowing that I had to do this. Use my education as my cultural responsibility to stand up and protect my communities as I hold and wear I guess the weight of community in my in my family. Right now, sea levels are impacting my island home, and we've been seeing sea levels rising since we're considered human in this country. We saw a max exodus of sea levels rising back in 1937, and you would probably, what we saw on our global landscape, there were many things that are probably just took a lot of, there was a lot of happening, I guess, with other folks. And so, it sort of shadowed what was happening elsewhere in the world. And so I guess, it was that calling that I had and that deep connection to the ocean that really empowered me to become a marine biologist and continue studies with the ocean, because that ocean is what's connected me back to my communities as I have lived away from home for a long time. And it's where I draw strength. And so, climate, it's kind of a new phenomena, right? It's like we've always seen the changes, but like we're just not feeling them equally. And so this fight, I've been probably slowly doing it since I was maybe 17 years old. We're being a part of groups, being a part of environmental conversation groups, trying to be a part of conversations, and seeing how in this country, in so-called Australia, we've moved from sort of like that climate action to more now climate justice, applying a more social lens to the way that we look, because, I think just hearing like geographical equity of where, how we're being impacted. And so, yeah, that's sort of what brings me into this space.
Thank you, Tish. Your light and energy is infectious, so I appreciate you sharing that. Janet, would you like to say a little bit about Women's Climate Congress? I mentioned it in your bio, but just tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing and what you're looking towards in this next period of time as a movement. You're on mute. Unmute.
Thank you very much, Christine, and thank you for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure to be here on this panel with Tish and Mamta, and I just add my respects to the Wadandi Buja people of the country where I am at the moment. I'm away from my home, which is normally in Canberra, but I'm in Western Australia in Margaret River at the moment, and this is a meeting place of land and sea. So the women, as you heard in my bio, the Women's Climate Congress was formed in January 2020, when Australia had been through these terrible bushfires over the summer of 2019 to 2020. And I thought it was time to bring together women around this issue of climate action, because Australia had been stuck at that point for a long time in what politically was referred to as the climate wars, where little progress could be made in action on climate because of the adversarial nature of our political system. And coming from a long time before that in my work in science communication, and I had developed a strong interest in dialogue in public discourse, and thinking that, you know, we could not achieve the wisdom that we need to solve these really big issues in society unless we can find a way of bringing people together to really think together in a collaborative way about these issues. And I had been really inspired by membership over many years that I'd had through another organisation in Canberra called A Chorus of Women, that brought an artistic voice as well to issues of concern and in relation to human rights and environmental issues. And I'd learned about the story of the 1915 International Congress of Women, which was in World War I, when women came together in a very little known historical story, but 1,500 women went to The Hague for a big international congress determined to find a way not only to stop the war, but to bring a changed paradigm, I suppose, to the world, to bring the possibility of long-term sustainable peace. And the resolutions that came out of that Congress, well, they didn't stop the war, sadly. At the time, they did have an amazing plan to do so through mediation by the neutral countries. But they also, if you look at those resolutions from way back then, many of them have gradually come into human rights law since. They read a bit like an agenda for what has been incorporated, including formation of what has become the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, and other human rights resolutions that have come about since that time. So it's a very inspiring case study for what happens when women can come together and have the space to actually come together and explore the way they view the world and the sort of policy agenda that they would really like to bring. Because even though women are far more represented now than they were, although it has been glacially slow over the last 100 years for women to come into parliamentary systems and other governance organisations, they are there in some numbers now, but still working within paradigms where they're kind of fitting into systems that were already established, historically, patriarchally established systems. So we were trying to create a space for women to come together to really explore their own policy priorities and empower them to bring that voice forward in relation to action on climate change, which is, as we know, an existential threat that really needs to have new wisdom brought to the table. So we've been working to build our movement, and through conversations with hundreds of women, we've developed, as you can see behind me here, something that we call the Women's Climate Congress Charter for Change, which has got some action areas around the things that we think need to happen more urgently to secure the climate, which we know that we need to do over the next very few years. And then other actions around longer term human and planetary well-being to create a changed paradigm that will be more lasting into the future. So we work to bring women together around these issues. We work at a level of talking to women in Parliament, in the federal Parliament, and in some of the state and territory parliaments, and also at grassroots area, meeting with women in communities, finding out where they're at, connecting them maybe with different aspects of the Charter to see how those actions can be taken forward. And we're sort of working on a program thinking ahead to the next few years, including the possibility that Australia might host a COP in 2027. I think it will be COP 31 in collaboration with the Pacific, and how gender can be a significant issue there, alongside emissions reduction and other very important actions to secure the climate. So
Thank you, Janet. So I'm going to poke a bear here because we have some amazing women here. Obviously, everyone gets that. And you mentioned COP, and I know a little bit of the backstory of She Changes Climate, which was a panel of all men for COP in Scotland. I don't know which number it was. But also, this is endless, isn't it? The decision tables for anything to do with climate, which is an existential crisis, are just a facsimile of the world that we currently, well, actually, it's kind of like the people that created the system aren't the ones that are going to provide the solutions, but the people that created the system are the ones that keep showing up at the COP table. So I want to hear, I want to go to the women. This is really important. Why women? Why now? And how do we actually galvanize this so that there is real change, not just, not just talking about it, but real change. So what is required? And this is open to any of the panel. Anyone who wants to go first to tackle this is welcome to speak to it. So just put your hand up and I'll call, or unmute your mic, and any of the three women. Yeah, Mamta, go.
Yeah, you asked a very relevant question. Can't stop myself from being the first one to respond, actually. Few statistics as to why we are where we are. In 2023, data showed that out of the 200 countries, only 15 countries are female leaders. That's where we are starting from. Then recently, IUCN has come up, I think I just saw the report yesterday, IUCN has come up with they have kind of compiled and analyzed data over the last 9 years. And they say, as per their assessment, it will take 162 years for women to reach gender parity with men in top ministerial roles across environmental ministries. This is the situation that we have, right? And COP is a reflection of what's happening at every level. And we do not have any way to have the voices of those who are at the forefront, who are just not the victims, they are also the solution providers. The women who, there is enough evidence now, I don't think we need to now even question how disproportionately climate change is impacting women. There's enough data that's talking about it. Yet, look at the numbers that are there in terms of women in leadership positions taking a decision. Last 29 years, we've had one woman president as a COP president. Last year, we had a fall on women delegates in COP29 from 36 to 34. And in the country delegations, the number are less than 19% of women. And then there is another data which shows that of these 19% who actually participated, who were present in the negotiation, in almost all the negotiation, in 77% time, it was the men who were talking. So these are facts, these are realities that is there. The question is that climate change impacts the entire world, not half of it. Women are 51% of the population. Why should we not be there at the decision-making table? I think that it is very, very important. That is the basis of She Changes Climate. That is what the movement is talking about. Started in Glasgow 3 years back when it was an all-male COP president. And that is when our founders, they kind of started this campaign, which has now turned into a global movement where they're saying that we really need to push and have women sit equally with the men at the decision. And why is it important? As I said, that they are not just the victims, they are the solution providers. Unless and until we have inclusion and diversity as the core principle of decision making, we will be repeating the mistakes that we are witnessing and bearing the impact of. You look around the world and you look at what's happening, whether it is climate change, whether it is conflicts, it is all unequal energies that is basically deciding the process. Another interesting data, and I find these data, this speaks, this almost tells you the story. In the peace negotiations that happened for the last 5 years, only 17% women were members in the last 5 years of peace negotiation processes, whereas it is the women and the children who are most impacted. We have data enough. So I think that that there is this whole issue of equity, equality, the issue of that women being equally and disproportionately, not equally, disproportionately being impacted, and therefore women need to be there in the process. The third important thing is what is about collaboration with Janet, and also I think Tish spoke about, that this is an emergency, this is a crisis. We cannot do it alone. We really, really need to come forward. When we say women need to be represented, we are not saying that we want to, shout, men should be out of it. We are talking about a balance. The planet needs a balance, and this is a natural balance in leadership that really now needs to be an immediate action.
Thank you, Mamta. Do any of the Janet or Tish, do you want to speak to that question as well?
Janet, you go first. I'll go after you.
I couldn't see you there for a moment. Well, I'd like to, yes, and I totally agree with everything that Mamta said. And the thing that I have been also thinking about a lot recently and noticing far more at the grassroots of the climate movement, not just at the sort of government level and who is at the table in COP, but I've noticed within the entirety of the climate movement that women's equality is not really seen as an issue for discussion per se. So often you'll go to a climate conference or a climate action conference and there'll be plenty of women in the room, because women are in positions in non-government organisations, within government and within other organisations. But the topic of gender equality, such as Mamta has just laid out so very clearly, is not seen as a topic of importance or significance for discussion. Now, First Nations justice is seen as a topic, and I totally think that that's right. It's super important that it is there, but I also think gender equality is a significant issue. And sometimes I even think, I'm even tempted to think, well, what do we need to resolve most urgently? Getting the emissions down or gender equality? I mean, obviously, getting the emissions down is the very important thing, but it's a chicken and egg thing. And I don't think that's been recognised by the climate movement more generally. And so a great deal of time can be spent talking about the great technologies that we have in the pipeline and how they're going to create the energy that we need, and how we've got the solutions. We're going to create a circular economy or bring in all the electric vehicles and so on. But none of that will happen if the governance if we don't attend to the governance and have the will to make these changes. And that's where the gender equality is a really significant issue. And I really feel it's not seen, that we need to bring it up the agenda within the climate movement more generally as a very significant thing. And that's why, as I mentioned earlier with Women's Climate Congress, we're sort of looking forward to if there is a COP in Australia in COP31, that can be a sort of a very significantly gender focused COP, where by that stage this issue has been brought right out into the open, and we're really addressing it, so that we can then, by addressing gender equality, can then address the other issues as well, and bring the decision making into balance, the sort of balance that we'd like to see.
Thanks, Janet.
And
Tish? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and just adding to that, like what both Mamta and Janet are saying, we're just in this moment of that we're all feeling it, these impacts of climate, and that equality is just not there. And what I actually identified back at COP26 in Glasgow was the ongoing barriers where these systems of oppression that are impacting women right across the globe is due to the men still being at the head of these decision-making processes, and taking space. And I agree with Mamta. It's not just, there is a role for our incredible, men and our brothers and sons out there. It's just like, how do we come back to that balance? Because, I certainly don't have all the knowledge and tools that others, add value to. But as the change in climate continues to surpass tipping points, we actually continue to see that it's the women of color and women broadly that are greatly affected by these crises, highlighting the fact that climate change is not gender neutral. And that's what we're here to really share, and why in this moment in time, in this critical decade, what we really need to do to really shift that. Because the reality is that this exacerbates the existing gender inequalities posing threat on women's health and well-being. And like, I remember reading the call to action, the letter that She Changes did, and it was like, it was a stat that was showing that women and girls are 14 more times, more likely to die in climate disasters, where the global population saw, remember during the Pakistan floods, in October, a few years ago, where Pakistani women and girls were left behind because they couldn't swim. All those women that were pregnant lost their babies through the immense trauma. That's a generation that's lost. That's the next generation. And while we continue to see these disparities, it is right. We are seeing women leading, from solutions with strength and leading with resilience. And I feel we're here to protect Mother Earth. It feels natural that Mother are the ones at the forefront of this that can nurture that same love. And so, and I think it comes back to the root causes of how we got here in the first place, through that racism, through colonialism, but patriarchy still being evident into today's, decision making. And so, as we sort of see where we are, we're in 2024, we've only got 6 years left. Who's still at the head of the table?
Mm-hmm.
Who's still leading those conversations? And I think hearing you, Janet, like about, going to conferences and having panels, they'll be on women and there'll be men speaking about them, like, why are we having a panel? Like, this is not right. But yeah, anyway, I'll throw it back to you, Christine.
Oh, thank you. You mentioned, Tish, a couple of things. You mentioned systems of oppression. I think I picked up when you first introduced yourself that you've going back to 1937 with the rising sea level in your home. I think you said that this is before you were considered humans. Did I hear that correctly? Yes. All right, thank you for that. I just wanted to be sure everyone heard that, before Tish and her people were considered humans. That makes me emotional to even think about it. There was a recognition by her people of the land islands that the tides, that the sea level was rising. So we have, I don't think we even have 6 years to change this. And so I'm wondering, is it time for women, the powerful women that are present here, and I know we've got some powerful men as well present on here to support. is it time that we kind of took charge, women, and had our own version of a COP and invited some of the good-hearted men to attend, or do we have to keep knocking at a door and hoping to tear it down? I want to. There is. I think there is such a moment in time where we don't have time to continue to keep tapping at the door. There is something else that is needed. I want to hear, what from the panelists before I open this to questions. I want to hear what you think is needed to actually get women into this conversation, not into the conversation, to actually get women to be, as Mamta said, the solution providers in partnership with men who care enough to provide them a platform. What is that? What is the action that you feel is most needed to be taken to turn this?
I'll have a go.
You can have a go, Janet.
So so you mentioned a women's COP. Well, certainly She Changes Climate has already been doing a good job for the last couple of years of having an international women's leaders summit, an online event that sort of goes around the world over the first year. I think it was 24 hours, and the second time maybe 12 hours or something, going through different time zones of wonderful discussions with women bringing solutions to the table. But I mean, I suppose I mentioned earlier on about the 1915 International Congress of Women. That was an inspiration to me to form the Women's Climate Congress. That's why we have that word Congress in our name. And so I suppose I always had a sort of a bit of an idea that it would be marvellous to have an international Congress of Women around this climate action. And yes, and the time is coming, with the momentum that's being created within the women's movement, when something like that could happen. But I think that would be fantastic. But also, I think the broader climate movement, as I have mentioned before, it would be really great if they could take the whole issue of gender equality on board as a really major issue, up there with emissions reduction and nature positive solutions.
But how, Janet? How do we do that? How do we get that to happen? That's the question.
Well, by talking about it like this, because I think that it's a bit of a blinkers off thing. I think there's a blind spot. I really think that there's a blind spot there. And I've only really even I've been working in this area since 2020, and I've only just really started to see it for its entirety, if you can see what I mean. So I definitely think we've got to talk about this and put it up there. I mean, within the Women's Climate Congress Charter for Change, we've got some actions, as I mentioned, which are the most urgent actions for securing the climate by 2030, we say, and then the longer term things. But number one of the short term things, we say, is gender balanced governance. So I think, we have to sort of get that up there on the agenda as a really number one important thing within the climate movement initially, and then to be able to take that voice to governments and internationally and then globally through the COP system eventually. So yeah, just get the blinkers off, I think, is the first step.
Okay, Mamta and Tish, do you have a response to my provocation?
Yeah, I think just adding already what Janet said is that it's actually it's capacity building. The fact of the matter that education is still a privilege for women, and especially here, like in Australia, we're very lucky compared to a lot of many nations right across this globe. But I think that's why I feel really honored being an ambassador here for She Changes Climate, because when I first went into COP26, I was so scared. All I saw was back then, the Scott Morrison government that was like putting carbon capture storage and Santos all over their pavilion. And it was really confronting. I had this weight, and I was carrying, not just only as a youth person, but I was carrying the weight of every First Nations, from Australia to Glasgow. And it was really overwhelming. It wasn't a safe space. I didn't see a lot of women. There was the environmental minister Susan Lay, and she was going with a court case against school strike for students who were taking a class action. And it was actually, that was obviously wasn't modeling what I had been inspired and empowered by. But through by learning more and finding safe spaces like She Changes, it was able to better equip myself with tools and resources and support mechanisms in these sort of international platforms, which are not designed for us. They were not designed in our structures, and then they were not designed for women because it was led by men. And so coming back then into now domestically, we know that women, or just in general, that we know that women are not giving a fair place at the table when it comes to deciding how we tackle these crises. We see this being played out today in Australia. And since the federal election in May 22, we have seen an increase of First Nations women in Parliament and across the spectrum, it's staunch and it's amazing, but the ongoing barriers is a lack of representation of women broadly when decisions are being made about the environment, about land and sea country. The patriarchy of white Australia has shamefully but successfully constructed a society around the erasure of women, but mostly First Nations women. Over the last few years at these international platforms, the fact of the matter is that we keep seeing fossil fuel lobbyists have more access than women, and it is shameful. I saw and experienced this back in COP27 at Sharm el-Sheikh, where there were 600 fossil fuel lobbyist men gathered and took part in these conversations, and please, to the incredible men that are on this space, please don't confuse that with hate or malicious intent. It was just more about illustrating that those that have power, who make decisions without factoring in the knowledge and the wisdom of those impacted first and worst, and I think that's where we sort of come back, is like, how do we continue to build up and give the skills and invest in our women's leadership? How do we continue to take them on a journey so that they continue to be the best voices and representatives for the groups that they may represent? And how do we ensure that they're in a safe space? Because again, we continue to see women being hurt in Parliament. We continue to see men being taken away. And this has happened in the last 3 years. And so how do we stop that? And that's just continuing to come together, standing in solidarity as one, and not falling victim to those patriarchal, comments that they make, and continue to build each other and not have that lateral violence. And so if we are to address these climate shifts, we need to prioritize and make sure and put people and women and planet first before, business interests. Because this is going to send a powerful and political signal that the world needs to trust the environmental integrity of the process. And we're going to address this climate change together, or, well, for me, climate justice, and not turn climate talks into sort of another fossil fuel convention, then let's start prioritizing that leadership and centering those most at stake. Sorry, Mamta, you go.
Thank you. I just kind of want to add on to what Tish and Jen said. I think that one of the most important things is leadership. We need to redefine leadership. We really need to relook at leadership. And with leadership, I would say balance, and this leadership has to be both at the global level as well as the local level. And the intersectionality, and just coming back to reflecting on my experience of what happens in the ground, the importance of understanding the intersectionality, because every decision that is made at the global level has an impact at the local level. And if you do not have the understanding or the exposure to the intersectionality between climate change and gender, you will not make the right policy. You will not take the right decision. And that knowledge needs to be disseminated and talked about loudly in whatever manner that you want to do at the local level as well as at the global level. So I think there is a lack of understanding, I will not say understanding, I think it is lack of acknowledging the importance of intersectionality in climate change. And that is something we really, really need to do. So that's one. And second, I think picking up from what Janet said, I think we really need to have the difficult conversations with the unlikely allies, if I may say so. You know, if we always, I love the idea of a women-led COP, a separate COP. I love it. I love the idea of having a Congress of Women, International Congress of Women, but we need to have the unlikely allies into these gatherings. We need them. These are the people who are making the decision. And if we do not influence, if we are not able to change their mindset, all we can do is talk in silos again. So I think that these difficult conversations with unlikely allies, very, very important, that we really need to do, and we need to keep on doing that. The third I would talk about is we need to come together. You know, we really need to come together, leave behind our own individual requirements, and just jump into this collaborative movement. There are the women gender constituency, there is the youth constituency. How can we all come together and put in our skills, our experience, our expertise into the movement? Because these constituencies are working very closely with COP. Instead of trying to create, reinvent the wheel, how can we give more power to all those bodies which are already existing? That's at the global level. At the national level, I think the national delegation, that goes influencing the national delegation is very, very important. We really need to know how the elections are making, who are our women really, who are these women who are part of these delegations? Can we work with these women leaders to see that they are, what Tish said, capacitated enough, strengthened enough to speak and be the voices of the countries that they represent? That is something that we really need to do. And third, I think political leadership. Elections are going on all over the world. Unfortunately, there's a fear that there will be similar leadership, the same leadership coming back. We'll have the same problems. We'll have the same conflicts. We need to influence political leadership. I think it is important to somehow speak out to several, I can say, talk about India. In India, there are so many women who do not go out and vote. So many women who vote because their husband tells them, please go and vote for this person. So many families, they do not know. They just vote because whoever gives them money or gives them something to drink, they will vote for them. I think that it is very important to promote or push for conscious voting. The EU elections are also there. We have in EU, if you look at EU, all those countries which are led by women, all those cities which have female leaders are really the ones who are moving towards sustainable sustainable policies, and they are all sustainable cities. There is enough evidence. We need women in leadership position. We need women to be there to lead, to decide.
Very nice. Can you just say who would be, give me an example of an unlikely ally?
The unlikely ally will be to start off, let's say the CEO, the male CEOs of the oil and gas companies. We really need to talk to them. Number one, we need to talk to all the unlikely ally. The unlikely allies will be the political leaders who are shunning all gender policies and programs, or who do not believe that climate change is real. We really need to talk to them. We need to talk to those women or those youth who have the power to create a sustainable future. And we need to talk to the men, for sure. We need to talk to the men.
So we've just got about 10 minutes to go. I would like to open if anyone from the audience has a question from any of the panelists. If you if you want to unmute yourself or raise your hand, my screen's doing funny things, but unmute yourself, raise your hand. If you raise your hand, I can generally see you and ask a question of either Tish, Mamta, Janet, or all of them. Anyone got a question that you want to ask?
I'd put a question in the chat line about how you see the role of CSW in all this.
Can I answer that? Yeah, I saw that in there. Thanks very much, Carol. Hello. Yeah, so, well, CSW is the Commission on the Status of Women, which is a little bit like the COP for gender equality, except for the meeting that they had in New York this year in March was CSW 68. So just imagine that, it's been going since 1948. And I sometimes think about all of the hundreds of millions of women hours that have gone into these processes over all of that time, and how wonderful it would be if that time could be spent on actually being at the table in the decision making on an equal footing, instead of constantly having to run this agenda for gender equality. That's a little bit of an aside, but I think there is a little bit of a disconnect between CSW and COP, which you know will be really, really good to work to close. Yeah. Because at the moment, well, within the COP process, there are protocols coming out of the Paris Agreement about gender equality, and the UN has its own gender equality plan. But as I've mentioned before, this issue of gender equality not being a key focus of the climate movement means that this work that's being done at CSW about gender equality, which is much broader than just climate change, obviously, but is sort of seen as something that's happening over there. And sometimes when I get the feeling that people within the climate movement think, oh, well, gender equality is being sorted out in that part of that women's movement over there, and it goes to the Commission on the Status of Women, and there's a whole lot of gender equality plans and things coming out of that. But I think it really would be good to try and bring those two things much more closely together, and that's another thing to maybe work towards for COP31 for Australia, to actually bring that gender equality strand in the same way as the biodiversity COP, which is a separate COP from the climate COP. People talk about trying to bring those together, and I think if the gender equality can be brought in as well, that would be a really fantastic step forward. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tanuja, you had your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question to any of the panelists?
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Christine, am I clear?
Yeah,
Yes,
we can
good.
hear you. Yes, yes.
Great, thanks. I would like to add a dimension to the point about equal representation at all levels, of course. That nature itself functions through a constant balancing of masculine and feminine. And so at the science level, we need to bring that to the table. But as a woman myself, an electrical engineer by training, our education system does not emphasize the feminine aspect of nature itself at every level, from mathematics to biology to physics and so on. So putting women up there is not sufficient, sorry to say. We also need to build out the understanding of nature as feminine, and also bring in more tools, scientific tools, that have a balance and recognition of the feminine aspect. And nowhere is that more important than in climate and in medicine.
Does Tish or Mamta, would you like to respond to Tanuja?
I mean, I was just going to quickly say thank you so much, Lucia. You are 100% right. And I think that's where my lens is of knowing that's why it's so important to work with those on the ground, but also bringing in the traditional knowledge and wisdom of that, because it's because we have worked in kinship and relationship with the planet, and it has been we put, like, I know in my culture, and I know I can't speak for others, but I know certainly in Turtle Island, Indigenous communities over there, it is in our creation stories, and that we have put just as high, and if not at the top, our natural world as a center of this, and and I think that's why we call her as Mother Earth, right? And Father Sky. Like, it's how we are intrinsic in this relationship. But Mamta, to you.
I agree with you. So, and thank you so much for bringing this. And, one way is obviously the way, I mean, I was just reflecting here in India, Tanuja, as you would know, I'm assuming you're from India. When we talk about Mother Earth, mother in itself is a feminine energy. So it's a Mother Earth. And over a period of time, this whole notion of Mother Earth has almost been converted into superstitions. This whole concept of feminine energy has been given a completely emotionally unstable. When we talk about feminine energy, there is power, there is strength, there is resilience. But when we talk to our children, for example, how many times do we converse in that same language? So I think at the education, we need to bring it. And there is so much. I'm grateful that I've been exposed to, for example, Tish, and similarly, some of the very famous Indigenous leaders who are actively working. And I just feel so drawn and inspired by how right and balanced their entire system is, if only we could just translate it into our education system. Very important point that you brought out about the scientific community. And, and therefore the training, looking at those institutes which provide training and which orients scientists, how do we really imbibe this whole concept of feminine energy as power rather than just emotions into the education curriculum. I mean, this is wonderful. I mean, I did not think about the scientists, so thank you so much for bringing this out. I think this is very, very important. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really fabulous. A fabulous reflection there, Tanuja. Thank you. So we're about to close. I would like to hear from each panelist. I'm going to invite you to invite the audience either to consider something or to act in some way, or what is it that you can offer as sort of a closing statement to the people who have shown up and given their time here. That will support us in our journey and add a little bit of your individual alchemical wisdom to the rest of our Climate Action Week, Sydney. Anyone can go first. Who wants to go first of the three panelists? Go ahead, Mamta.
Well, first of all, I am grateful to you all for being here. And the fact that you are here in itself shows that you really believe in She Changes Climate, just the title, She Changes Climate. And I would say join the movement, bring in your expertise, looking forward to collaborate. I think the more diverse we are as a team, the more diverse set of skills that we have, and if we can just bring it all together, we will be there. So thank you very much, and we wish you a very, very happy, enjoyable and happy and insightful Climate Week in Sydney.
Yeah. Thank you. What I will be doing is I will be sending an email out to everybody with the link for the recording, but also Mamta is going to provide me with the details of how people can join the movement. Thank you. So Tish, do you want to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to you all being here. You know, it's the start of many conversations. It's like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon here in the South. And so it's just really great to, you know, that just to have these engaging conversations, but I guess how do we turn these words into actions? And so if there are, you know, especially in this Climate Action Week, you know, are there women in your community that you can help support and, you know, connect to? What's your sphere of influence that you can help support them in any way? Are there movements that you enjoy that you want to continue to back? And, you know, can you spark kitchen table conversations about more of this so we, you know, continue to grow this movement, because it will require all of us in order for just an equitable future, and we can't do this alone. And we need, you know, especially like our allies that identify as, you know, male, to be a part of that journey with us. And so I think that's all I have. We're coming up here in Australia into a federal election. So I think engaging in some, you know, we saw a lot of women from fields come up from our last election. And so what does that look like? Can we continue to back and support those? And so I think just staying engaged, as, you know, we really need bipartisanship for real systemic reform and to strengthen our democracy, and to have better rights. And we need women at top of that. So let's help get them there. And to you, Janet.
Thank you.
Yes, and I can add to that. I can see we're right on time now. Definitely join the movement. If you're in Australia, the Women's Climate Congress is the Australian sort of organisation who is really working at this nexus between gender equality and climate, and we're part of this international movement that you've heard about as well. And I would challenge people in Climate Week to maybe just, when you're talking to particularly women and men, or just raise this issue of gender equality, the significance of gender equality as being part of the central conversation to have around climate action, out there with just as important as getting the emissions down and the other things that we so much need to do. So just try to go beyond women just being there in the room if they're working within or fitting into the existing system, to what is the women's real agenda in being there, and how can we promote that. Yes, maybe I'll leave it at that, seeing as we're
Thank you. And just to give Richard, I saw your comment here. She Changes Climate is almost, you know, is incredibly focused on the unheard voices of the global South. And so if that message didn't come across, that is really the work of She Changes Climate, and providing a platform for those who would never normally find a place at any table to make a decision, and have something worthy to say, to find a place to those tables. And so thank you for raising that question. Thank you, everyone, for being here. As I mentioned, I will send you an email with recording and how to get involved. And if you have any other questions, please ask. Thank you to our wonderful panelists for taking time out of your schedule, and let us continue to work at She Changes Climate.
Thank you so much, Christine.
All right, have a good evening for those in Australia, and good day to those in the rest of the world. Bye.